Xi Jinping with waves and cheers.
Great, welcome back. It's now 3 minutes past 7 a.m. Good morning, welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Good Morning Kenya. Now it's time for us to get into the political segment, People and Politics. Let's take a look at what's happening in the country and what's affecting you as a Kenyan. All right, so let me start with the front page of the local dailies. Let me start with the Star newspaper. The Star says that cheap rail returns one route at a time. Cheap rail returns one route at a time. Nyahururu line, dormant since 1980, now resumes services. That actually resumed services last week. And it's going to cost you only 50 shillings from Nyahururu to Ol Kalou. But normally, when you use a matatu or a PSV, it will cost you 200 shillings. So this is 50 shillings since 1980. We are waiting for more, all right? There is another case here when it comes to Ebola. Rich nations should now fund Ebola fight in East Africa, says lobby groups. that is East Africa countries are now being asked to support the countries which are not able to sustain themselves. Still the inner pages. ODM's ambitious plan to fire up its bases ahead of 2027 election. Renewed mobilization comes amid growing internal contestation over the Orange Party's future direction. We've discussed this over and over and over, but there is no harm in discussing it once again. Sifuna entry jolts opposition matrix. Okay, sources within the opposition say that Nairobi senator can no longer be ignored in their power-sharing plans. Is it? Okay. Okay, that is on the inner pages. And finally, Gachagua's bid to overturn 2024 impeachment flops. The verdict is now likely to have significant political implications ahead of the 2027 general election. That is what we are going to talk about today. On the front page of the Daily Nation, Gachagua's next steps. Now, what is the verdict? Court judgment says that the violation of Gachagua's rights under Articles 47 and 50 of the Constitution does not vitiate the impeachment process undertaken under Article 145 and the public participation. The court ruled that National Assembly held a constitutionally sufficient exercise by providing reasonable notice and multiple channels of engagement for citizens to be heard. And finally, is it a case of political bias? Now, court dismissed claims that the House speakers and MPs were biased, noting that without evidence, the allegations were merely suspicious and amounted to political dissatisfaction. There is a story there that many people were wondering, where the former Chief Justice David Maraga was arrested by plainclothes police officers yesterday on Langata Road in Nairobi during protests against the planned excision of 89 acres from the Nairobi National Park. According to KWS, has defended the project, insisting that it is conservation investment and not a parking facility for the Bomas of Kenya. Okay. So that is where it is. Who has the Standard? Wakili, do you have the Standard?
Yes, I have the
What
Standard.
does it say, the front page?
Condemned.
Condemned.
Unfairly by the executive, legislature and the judiciary. Absurdity. Although the High Court found flaws in parts of the impeachment process of the former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua,
yes,
and awarded him Kenya shillings 50 million in damages, it upheld that the Senate's vote to remove him from office stands, dealing a major blow on his bid for political redemption and causing confusion in the rule of law, with the ruling effectively locking him out of public office. Unless overturned on appeal, the former deputy president now faces the toughest battle of his political career. Gachagua must now chart a new course as questions mount over his influence in Mount Kenya, his leverage within the opposition, and his path to the 2027 political contest. Read page 4 and 5.
That is perfect. You were in the court yesterday.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Please give us a quick summary. That was 10 hours of...
yes, you know...
Somebody was asking, did you How does it feel sitting for 10 hours?
Well. Of course, there is no legal requirement that the judges must read everything. And I think what happened yesterday was done out of excess or abundance of caution. It was meant now, for the court to thoroughly explain themselves in English that, of course, was not well understood by the local men or lay persons. But it was meant just for the court to offer a thorough explanation for what now became of the decision.
Because this is a high-stakes case.
Yes, of course. But in ordinary, in ordinary course of business, in court proceedings, what we always do is that the court comes, parties having fully understood their cases. You were representing the petitioner, this one was representing the respondent, so the court now dives to the analysis and the determination of the matter. That is what ordinarily happens in the course of business. Number one, to save on the court's time, and number two, to just set down the issues that were up for determination by the Honorable Court, and then now to determine those issues.
We'll come back to them one by one.
Yes.
But generally, what happened yesterday, what do you make of that? You are part of the petitioner.
Yes.
One of the petitioners.
Yes. I think the decision to me, as it has been with most of the lawyers and advocates, the decision is very confusing. And I think we will have now an opportunity moving forward or upwards to the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court to get some clarity. I know, number one, the court arrived at the conclusion that the process undertaken by our senators at the Senate by denying, denying the former Deputy President H.E. Rigathi Gachagua, his right to an adjournment, that in itself violated his right to a fair trial. So having violated his right to a fair trial, one will say, now, the process, the ultimate conclusion or the decision that was arrived at by the Senate, being a product of a poisonous tree, then was also a poisonous outcome. So one will have expected in the ordinary flow of circumstances or matters, that now the court having found the process to be unfair, then the determination that the impeachment was lawful, then that will have been set aside. So that was the ordinary expectation of every lawyer.
In fact, that takes us back to the null and void case. David Maraga, remember?
Yes.
When the case, it was about the process.
Of course.
And that's why the election was overturned.
Yes, indeed.
Why is that this one is not overturned? And yet he was not given a chance to a fair hearing?
Well, my Lord Justice Anthony Mrima, tries to offer an explanation by saying that, we have constitutional demands and statutory demands, and compares the process of the removal of a deputy president to that process of the removal of a governor or a deputy governor, so that he creates a distinction and says that, the Constitution demands that once this has been done, this automatically happens, so that if the court, if the Senate has found that the process that the charges levied against you were justified, and you now stand impeached, and the court does not have any business overturning that decision of impeachment, because overturning that decision of impeachment will create a confusion. The confusion in the sense that we'll be having two deputy presidents in Kenya. So we'll be having the Professor Kindiki and having Rigathi Gachagua as two deputy presidents, which was not envisaged by the framers of the Constitution. That is the explanation that is offered by my Lord Justice Anthony Mrima. But again, he goes ahead now to create the distinction with the removal of a governor by saying the removal of a governor is not done under the Constitution itself. Like, we have a statute, the County Governments Act, that gives us a formula for the removal of a governor. And that statute goes ahead and says that once an appointment has been done or is about to be done, that process can be stayed or can be stopped. So, but, because of that, now he says that you see, the Constitution gives some room to meddle with the appointment of who becomes a governor if there has been a removal process. But now the Constitution does not give us room to meddle with the process once it has been done by our senators. which I think is does not make a lot of sense to me.
Okay. The gentleman speaking is Shadrack Oboy, is an advocate of the High Court. I did not introduce my guest. And Mheshimiwa,
by the way, you don't say hi. Let's begin on a very high note.
Mheshimiwa Dedan Kitur is representing the good people of Nandi Hills. Mheshimiwa Karibu Sada.
Thank you very much.
And Oscar Mondi is the University Don, and also Oscar. This is confusing. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Let me come back. Based on what you've heard, Oscar, there is more political.
One thing, this is confusing to you and the legal man. It's not confusing to me. And you know, before we started this conversation, Shadrack was, Wakili was here, and we were seated at this same station with Wakili. And I told Wakili that, you see, you're a legal mind. I'm not. I'm a political scientist. This is a political process. Why do you get impeached? Cabinet secretaries or ministers or anybody in government gets impeached by parliament because they are unpopular. That was the history of impeachment. Just because you're unpopular to the parliament, you can be impeached. They just don't like your face.
Not entirely
so. It is not.
Not entirely so.
I'm saying that is what it is, political process. What they're struggling with, and I told him that the best thing Gachagua should have done what Nixon did. Resigned before facing the impeachment proceedings. They advised him to go ahead and get impeached. I'm now advising him again. If he's your client, go and tell him to take the 50 million. Because the Court of Appeal can even be worse. The Court of Appeal might take away the 50 million that was given by the High Court. Because the thing is, what the court did yesterday,
Oscar,
what the three judges did yesterday, they acted extremely not to interfere with another branch of government. The proceedings of the legislature and the proceedings at the judiciary and the executive, we have three arms of government, and that is because of the checks and balances. Nobody should overstep. And the courts didn't overstep. And the courts knew that impeachment process is a legislative work, and the courts refused to overstep their mandates. And they only checked during the process, was anybody's rights violated? Yes, it might have been violated. Can the violation that might have happened overturn the whole thing? No, it cannot. One of the things that they indicated, that impeachment process does not even happen at the Senate. It happens at the National Assembly, not the Senate. The Senate only validates. Impeachment of a governor does not happen at the Senate. It happens at the at the county assembly. That is where the prosecution is done. When the prosecution and the judgment is made by the members of the county assembly against a governor, the Senate only comes to check if there were any reasons to doubt the process, and they only validate or invalidate. So the impeachment process was done at the National Assembly and concluded there.
Okay. So
and now the Senate was only brought to, that is why even public participation that was done by and Wakili and his team actually reminded the National Assembly that, look, before you finish the impeachment, please make sure you do a public participation, which was done. So if they could have not reminded the National Assembly, that could have been a very strong case in the courts.
Okay.
But they reminded the National Assembly that I should go and do what? A public participation, and it was done. And that was why everything was validated. But again, I'm telling Wakili, this one is not for people who went to Parklands University.
Okay.
Gathering, political science, it's politics, and impeachment is a political process.
Wakili, you have your right of reply to that.
Thank you, thank you.
When you listen to this, to all this, it means that the National Assembly has got an upper hand.
Absolutely, and I think we were given in the entire judgment, which I think, and I like what's happening in our country these days, where things are now put in the open, and for that judgment to have been rendered, for all those close to 10 10 hours. I think it was also for because it was a public interest case.
Yes.
It was for every Kenyan to feel satisfied that this is, laying bare every process and every step. And I'm so glad that the National Assembly was given the Bill of Health, that we did the right thing from the start to the end, except for that particular aspect of the administrative action on the part of the Senate, which in my view was created. I think the lawyers advised their client that get sick or create some, we know them. And at that time, they had also this guy who is very good in art. The gentleman was been writing a lot of scripts. So probably they advised that, look, because the things are really getting bad for you, let's create some story here. And he found himself in hospital. And, and around that time also, there was also one of the members of parliament. You remember, when they were creating these things of abduction. And so even one of the members of parliament abducted himself and went to the same hospital where the former deputy president went into. So of course, so trying now to say that there is still another window of opportunity, yet actually in the High Court, they deal with the facts. The details, the facts. When it will now come to the Court of Appeal, it will be more of the law, whether the law has been applied, which in my view is actually dead in arrival. But of course, the other thing also, you expect that these are politicians. So what you will be expecting them to do is just to be able to have to be a conversation. Like even today, it's a conversation that we're having. So they're enjoying the limelight. But in my view, it is done. And one thing I also appreciate is going into the future and into the posterity, it shall be known that anybody who occupies any office in our country must know that they are, you can never be independent, you depend on others as well. So the kind of mistreatment that we all got when the former deputy president was the deputy president, I think, and I agree with Oscar, that these are political officers that you need to also have good relations with people, even as much as you are, rendering the works, respect other jurisdictions as well. So in my view, that judgment, we welcome it. Now, I think we are going now to be hearing change of narratives, because I've had some people talk about something like 2-term, you hear 1-term, and then now we're going to have now a half-term conversation now coming in. Wow. So it's going to be quite interesting going into the future. But I want to agree with you, Oscar, that we advise our friend Wakil Shadrach.
I personally told him.
Lawyers cannot be advising.
We are politicians. We just give our layman advice to you that you advised him before.
That particular day I told him, but I think they came up with that idea of rushing to Karen Hospital, which was not a very good strategy, because in politics about strategies. I mean, the strategy they used of this getting this guy to hospital was the worst ever. The best for Gachagua was to resign before impeachment. That was my best advice as a political scientist. I mean, that was my best advice. But the legal minds are for the paycheck.
Yes,
and you see,
they don't want to be advised.
They don't want to be advised. It's about the paycheck.
even
they're going to appeal another paycheck.
His Excellency Rigathi Gachagua also has a right for a fair hearing.
Yes, of course. Yes,
and I also have a right, because I advised him, but because he received something today from the paycheck, we can get something out of it.
Victor,
it seems you're in a straitjacket today.
I think my friend here, Oscar, is misleading the viewers and the listeners at home. He's, in other words, rewriting the verdict that was written by the court. Number one, remember, the court found that the Senate, having declined the request by His Excellency Rigathi Gachagua to have the proceedings adjourned because he had been admitted at the current hospital, was in itself a violation to his right to a fair process. So it doesn't, I mean, whatever my colleagues here are saying, that he was ill-advised to be taken in hospital was wrong. I mean, the arguments do not make sense as far as the final outcome of the court has, what the outcome of the court was yesterday. So in other words, what I'm trying to say is this. Number one, the assertions that, His Excellency Gachagua being admitted to hospital was his own creation, but not a medical emergency. That assertion has been thrown out of the window. The court arrived at the conclusion that indeed there was a medical emergency, and for that reason, the Senate acted improperly by proceeding with the proceedings in his absence. That is number one. Number two, I want to clarify something for the benefit of the members of the public. I know we were here 2 years ago with Oscar. Oscar and some other gentlemen. And of course, Oscar's political position has been the same. He has not changed. It does not surprise me much. But I know in the fullness of time he's going to understand what I'm saying. The reason we have superior courts over and above the High Court is because we acknowledge that man is to err. We acknowledge that we have men and women. However learned they are also susceptible to making mistakes at the High Court. So we have another avenue called the Court of Appeal, where we have other more learned and more experienced judges that are going to relook at the matters, not entirely on the questions about law alone, but to reevaluate and to reconsider even the facts that were presented before the court, so that they can arrive at their own independent conclusions on the matters that were before the High Court. Again, we also have the opportunity of going to the Supreme Court, so that the court can determine this issue one way or another. But what is important this morning for our listeners and probably our viewers to understand, and this had been my submissions before the court, that you know, the process of impeachment is a unique process. That is what you heard lawyers say, sui generis. It's unique because, number one, it is a constitutional process because it is done in the name of the Constitution. Mheshimiwa here were doing, you know, they came up with this motion, they passed it, the motion for the removal of Deputy President, in the name of the Constitution under Article 144. So they were not doing it outside the four corners of the Constitution. So it is a constitutional process, but has a political character. What now Don is saying, you know, Oscar is of the view that if I don't like your, your red tie, that can be a ground for impeachment. Of course, those have been the arguments, politically speaking. But again, there are two ways in which the courts have arrived at this, have analyzed certain outcomes. Number one, the court, as this court did, the court said it is not going to delve into the merits of what was discussed before the National Assembly. And Mheshimiwa, hapo muko sawa, you can decide whatever you do. The only catch where the Supreme Court has said, especially in the Mike Mbuvi Sonko decision and Kawira Mwangaza's decision, the court have said, well, as a general rule, the court is not going to relook at the merits or otherwise of why the decision has been made that you need to be impeached. But again, if it appears that the decision to impeach you or the grounds were so absurd, like what now Don is saying, that he does not like the color of your tie. That in itself can lead now the court to reopen and to have a merit review of the decision that was made by the National Assembly or by the County Assembly or the Senate for that matter. So those are unique situations. But this one is not one of those unique situations. So what the court did, the court only looked at the process. So and found that the process at the Senate was unprocedural. So now one wonders, why then would you be saying, if it was unprocedural, take 50 million. Take 50 million, and again, the decision that was made, being a fruit of the poisonous tree, becomes again legal. How?
In my view, I think there were 7 key issues that
of course,
dealt with.
Yes.
And there were only 2 issues that you succeeded. The other 5 were dispensed. So clearly, you have to just create where you can begin hanging on, and you keep hanging on this issue of Senate and jumping up and around that. And clearly, I and Oscar have said that they had to create something, and of saying, the Deputy President has, a healthy issue. We all know, but let's just believe, with that anyway, so they go hanging on the same. We expect also, of course, that they will get to go to the Court of Appeal, but all Kenyans they listened to the case as it was being, processed, and clearly there's no future, but you have a window, in my view, if that is, and I would also agree with Oscar, that please take the best in our, general view. We may not be as legalistic as you are, but if you take the 50 million, it could be the best thing you could do for yourselves. But saying that you want to try that, and probably also anyway, maybe they are still also trying to find a way of hanging on to maybe Court of Appeal to still get something that they can find themselves if they can get into the ballot in 2027, and of course maybe still try to remain relevant in one way or the other for them to try and participate in the next general
nothing
elections.
bars him from participating.
Is there a case of political bias here?
No, wait. What is arriving at and what Wakili is asking here, that nothing bars him from participating? That is a big question. The big question is Gachagua able to be in the ballot in 2027? Wakili, I know you're a legal guy. You see nothing bars him. I think from my understanding of this case yesterday, Gachagua stands impeached. He cannot participate in the elections. Whatever happened at the ICC when Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto were allowed to participate in the elections, and Waluke, for example, these were legal cases. And I've told you, impeachment is not a legal case by its merits. And there's a difference. Because if you're facing a legal case like Waluke, and now you are out of bail pending an appeal, he was allowed to contest. But if you've been impeached
and completely out of office,
you cannot be in the ballot. And whatever was found, for example, the seven issues, for me, like the case of Raila Odinga versus IEBC in 2022, I think Julie Soweto and the others sees the fingers of somebody called Jose Camargo inside the servers, right? But the case was done like this. They say, even if they were seen there, did it merit the entire election to be invalidated? That yes, there was that evidence. Like in this case, there was this small evidence. Was the court able to invalidate the entire impeachment process because of the violation that was done? And the court, in its own mind, feels that, okay, there was a small problem, but 99% of this is right.
Okay. I'm just trying to think out loud. Wakili.
Yes.
What would have happened if that decision was quashed and he's reinstated?
No, of course, you know, in court, you cannot be given what you've not prayed for. It's just like prayer to God. If you are the one who is praying for, if you are praying like me to become the member of parliament of Kajara North, that is what God is going to give me. He cannot send me to Nandi. You understand?
Right.
So what His Excellency Rigathi Gachagua did in his amended petition, he amended and removed the request for a reinstatement.
All right.
He said instead he wants to be compensated for the violation of his rights. So that in itself tells the court that, you see, that is why I'm telling you the ultimate decision that was made by my Lord Justice Anthony Mrima, whom I respect, and I've learned a lot from him. I find his decision to be very confusing because with a concession having come from the first petitioner, the former deputy president, that he does not want to be reinstated. Now saying that you cannot now do away or declare to be unconstitutional the outcome of the impeachment because of the flaws of the procedure, or because you think that it is going to create a confusion where we are going to have two deputy presidents. Right. You see that is just oxymoronic.
Okay.
Eh? So, and lastly, perhaps before, you know, Oscar is trying to confuse the people. We need to help the people to understand the true position of the law.
Just hold that. Can you hold that? I want to serve you tea.
Yeah, I should just hold that.
I'm a good man.
Just hold. Oscar is my friend, but I owe him a duty.
Let's take a quick break. More after this. Stay with us.